There are at least 50 of these mosaics. Most of them give us a place as well as a product. They add up to one conclusion. Rome was being supplied from all corners of the Mediterranean.
Italy's not big enough to support the city of Rome. It is a city that's drawing in resources from everywhere.
This was a new moment in Western history. Rome had become what we now call a consumer city on a vast scale. These aren't luxury products, they're basic commodities. Wood, leather, oil, wine, and most important by far, grain.
People talk about Rome being a consumer city with a population of about 1 million, and that implies 150,000 metric tonnes of grain a year. Now, I don't know how big those ships are, but you need a lot of ships like that to bring in 150,000 metric tonnes of grain.
As the city grew, farms in Sicily, Libya, and then Egypt were given over to producing wheat for the people of Rome. When the grain ships arrived in Italy, the word would pass round Rome. The food had arrived. This was one thing the empire did for Rome. It kept them alive. But it did more than that. I want to think about life in that consumer city. Who were the winners and who were the losers? One really interesting thing is how they used this imported grain. And that means thinking about bread, not just eating it, but making it. I'm very much second in command.
Wait, question.
Okay, so
Right.
I'm now being trusted with the action. 200,000 Roman citizens living in the city of Rome got each month what was called a corn dole. A free ration of corn. That means about 35 to 40 kilos of corn, which was enough to make bread for a month for about 2 people. This was an extraordinary privilege for citizens in Rome. 200,000 of them received free rations from the state. But how did it work? Many of them lived in one-room apartments with no kitchens, so they relied on the baker to turn their 40 kilos into something they could eat. You going to try it?
Yeah.
Proviamo.
Good.
Not bad for a first attempt. It's not bad. And also, it's wonderful people's food. This is tearing and sharing bread. You don't even have to own a bread knife to be able to tuck into this. It's good. For poor Romans, this was the staple food that kept them alive. But they didn't distribute it in the way we would expect. You've got to put out of your mind, I think, this was some kind of proto-welfare state. Sure, some of the poor would have benefited from the grain, but charity wasn't what was uppermost in the emperor's mind when he put all that time and money into distributing this grain. What he was concerned about was the idea that a hungry populace was a dissatisfied populace, and a dissatisfied populace was a dangerous one. Also the fact that the distributions didn't go to the poorest in Rome. They went only to Roman citizens themselves. You had to be a citizen in order to get this grain. And that made it a really important perk of being a full Roman. In a way, what this tells us is that being a full citizen of Rome was a privileged status to which outsiders could aspire. And perks like the grain handout help you understand why people wanted to be Roman. But it also shows us that all these things, the empire, the imports, the new citizens, were all part of a cycle. The bigger Rome got, and the more it consumed, the bigger the empire had to be to support it. So how did Rome's massive consumption change life in the city? Well, for one thing, this was one of the best times in history to be a baker. And it's a baker who left one of the strangest monuments in Rome, now hidden beneath one of the main city gates. It's the tomb monument of a man called Marcus Vigilius Eurysakes. He's almost certainly an ex-slave, and he was a baker and a contractor. He must have made a whole pile of money in that job, otherwise he wouldn't be able to afford a tomb like this. What Eurystheus has done is given himself a theme tomb. At the very top, all around the monument, there were scenes from the life of the bakery. There's the kneading, putting the bread in the oven, weighing the stuff out. And even these rather strange circles and columns underneath will be instantly recognisable to a Roman as bakery equipment. The circles are almost certainly the kneading machines, and the columns are the bins in which the dough is kneaded. What this says in Latin is, this is the tomb of Eurystheus, the baker and contractor. Apparet. It's obvious. Or what I think we'd say, this is the monument of the baker. Get it? And I really like the way that get it still speaks to us 2,000 years later. Have we got that this is the tomb of the baker? Yeah.